Hello, everybody. Welcome to ABL Down on the Farm, episode 28, where we talk all things prospecting, but especially prospecting the ABL, a 30-team dynasty league with 20 slots for each team for minor leaguers for a glorious 600 prospects. And tonight, I'm very lucky to be rejoined on the show by a former guest, Mark, of the Cleveland Guardians in the ABL. We're going to be talking about a lot of interesting rebuilding topics tonight with Mark. But without further ado, let me bring in the star of the show tonight. Hey, Mark, welcome back.
Hey, Steven, what's going on?
I'm all right. It's good to have you back on the show. We're going to talk about a lot of what I think are interesting topics for this evening for fantasy baseball purposes. But I know you had an interesting life experience recently. A long drive with family up to my neck of the woods in the Northeast. And I know you wanted to share some observations for the dudes who live in the Northeast with me of what it was like for somebody from the state of Texas to drive up.
So most of you probably know that I have a daughter that's going to school at Montclair State in New Jersey. And, I've been to the Northeast several times, but it's always been, I've always flown in, taken an Uber, subway, or walked or whatever to wherever I needed to go. But of course, this time we're taking my 19-year-old daughter and everything she owns and cramming it into my F-150 and driving, 22 hours up to Montclair, New Jersey. It's just different. It's the roads are not built for pickup trucks.
No, they're not.
They're much more narrow. And like I told you before, I'm sure the weather has a lot to do with it, but there's a lot of potholes, a lot of I think my shock absorbers took a beating that they've never experienced before. And then I think, and I didn't share this with you earlier, but one of the biggest things I found out about New Jersey is you can't pump your own gas. They have to do it. I was like, what? What is this?
I know. It is kind of bizarre. It's like an old rule. It's a safety thing in New Jersey, but obviously the gas pumps are no different there than they are anywhere else.
Well, in fact, we read up about it. Historically, it was a safety issue, and then it just became tradition. And now, even to this day, they don't want to do away with it. But fortunately, I gassed up in Allentown in Pennsylvania coming in, and then I coasted on fumes into Philadelphia to refill. So I never had to go through that. It just seemed a little odd to me, but
yeah. Well, you get used to it when you're in the Jersey, which some of us affectionately refer to as the armpit of America.
Yeah. Actually, I really, really liked the area. I loved the architecture of the houses. The people were fine. Just the scenery. Here where I live, it's probably one of the most ugliest areas as far as aesthetics go. It's flat. There's not many trees. So yes, getting up into that. We drove up through the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, and seeing the countryside in Pennsylvania, and then Jersey, of course. Montclair is up on that mountain there that overlooks New York City, and it was great. We loved it. We loved everything about it. But I just found I found the roads unique and very claustrophobic for my big truck to navigate. If we moved up there, we'd need to get a little Kia or something. So
yeah, but you just devalue your property value by calling it a really ugly area. So
right.
Hopefully we'll have a lot of viewers on tonight's show when you go to resell. So that's nice, and I'm glad you were able to spend that time with your daughter and for that big life event going off to school. So that's exciting. And as I was saying on the show, on the pre-show, that I'll be down in your neck of the woods next spring. So maybe we'll get a chance to grab a beer together or something. That'd be nice.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So get a lot of interesting topics to chat about tonight. I know this year for your team, it's an unusual season because it didn't go as well as it normally goes for you, and you decided at one point to pull the parachute cord and go for a rebuild. and interested in a little bit about your thoughts about that decision, but also about your strategy in rebuilding, because at least as I recall it, in conversations I was having with you, you were very focused on proximity, or getting guys who could help you either right away or in the next year. But you also combined it by collecting a lot of draft picks. So I'm just interested in hearing your strategy about like why you decided to pull the ripcord, but then how you formulated your strategy and implemented your strategy in terms of a rebuild.
Yeah, so we have to go really back to the end of last season. Um, I had Sandy Alcantara, Logan Webb, Brandon Woodruff, Marcus Stroman, and I was most likely going to keep all those guys, or maybe keep three of them and trade one to get a couple of bats. Um, I had every intention of contending again in this season. Um, but then of course Sandy got injured, Woodruff got injured. Um, so that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That was like $69 there that up in smoke. And as well as I know, $190 to build the rest of your team with is not ideal.
Yep.
And of course, I had, Mike Minor retired. He didn't retire officially, so I couldn't get rid of his salary, but he basically stopped pitching, which probably for the better. But anyway, I, anyway, I still had his salary on the books. I had one other, I can't think of it off the top of my head, but so anyway, I dug a pretty big salary hole. I cut Sandy, I cut Brandon, took those hits for this year,
Yep.
and clean slate for next year, which is good. I still have Minor's contract, but that's like $6. So anyway, basically hit the reset button in the winter, and of course with our rules, and I understand the reasons why those rules are in place, but we couldn't really dump once the draft happened, or once the auction happened. We couldn't dump after that. So I went into the auction basically trying to grab a few big names with what little money I had. I got Kyle Schwarber. I also had Glasnow still. Forgot about that.
Oh yeah.
But he was injured to start the season, so his value kind of diminished somewhat. But anyway, I took those guys and flipped them for pieces. But yeah, you're right. I had I was looking mostly for proximity because I want to contend again in 2025. And I have a lot of those guys that are those post hype sleeper type guys, and some have actually broken out. Like Colton Cowser broke out this year.
Hmm.
Herstad, he's kind of he had some good moments, but he's been injured. He had the concussions. Doesn't look like he's going to make it back up with the big team, and if he does, it's probably only going to be for a week or two. I traded for Brett Beatty. I traded.
That was with me.
Oh, was that you?
Yeah, I gave him Beatty. Yeah.
Okay, I thought it was somebody else. But anyway, I traded for a few Adams, or who else? Some of the bigger names there. I mean, I got Addison Barger. I've got Jonathan Rodriguez, who came up, did okay, but he's been down in the minors mostly. So I got a lot of those guys that are fringe, um, could break out anytime. A lot of that type of guys. But the main thing I'm going to have next year is going to be money. I'm going to
Uh-huh.
have I'm going to have about $160 for maybe 10 slots, 10, 11 slots. So I'll be young on one end, but at the other end, I'll probably be able to supplement that with some good veterans. And I expect to contend. But just like, if things go sour, if I have the Allen type of luck and I just get hit with injuries left and right, then I can always reset again. I think if you kind of in that middle zone, if you're just barely making the playoffs, or if you're just barely
Yeah.
making the playoffs, unless your team is just trending that way because of your youth growing up, you're really not going to get very far, because you're not going to have the best draft picks most likely. Of course, we know what year one brought with Duke and getting the first overall pick, even
Yep.
though he only had one ping pong ball, but still. generally, if you finish in the middle, you're just kind of treading water. So you either want to be at the top or the bottom. I feel in these types of leagues. So yeah, as soon as June 1st rolled around, I made the proclamation. I dumped Schwarber and Glasnow. Got some decent pieces for them, I think. Picked up a first from Cincinnati for next year, which I hope, no offense, Lenny, that you have another year like you had this year. So,
Right.
because that could be Ethan Holiday level type pick if I'm lucky. But
Yep.
but anyway, yes, definitely looking for proximity. But at the same time, I do have like we talked about, 7 first rounders and an early second rounder.
Yep.
So I'll have 8 of the top 35, 40 picks, again, depending on lottery luck.
Yeah.
So
Well, I want to get back. I do want to talk about the picks for a second, but can we just take a step back? Because as you were talking, it struck me that, you were already kind of in the rebuilding mindset going into the season and just kind of were on pause because of the dump rules.
yes.
But did your circumstance affect the way you drafted minor leaguers?
No, not really. I'm still looking best available.
Mm-hmm.
Generally when I'm drafting, because I figure even proximity guys, you're still looking at a year or two. So no, in fact, one of the guys that I'll talk about near the end of the show, is very far away,
Uh-huh.
and I love him, and I think he's going to be, and I think even Duke commented. Um, I think it might have been just to me, but he'd never heard of the guy before. But I think he's going to be somebody that's really special down the road. But
Oh, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking
yeah,
forward to that.
it's one of my crushes, or it's the crush that I'll mention at the end. Um, but anyway, yes, I didn't really put that much stock into during the FYPD as far as the rebuild goes. I was just looking best available at that point. Um, But I've got, like I said, I've got the 7 first and the 1 second. I
Yeah, so let's
guarantee.
talk about those picks. You're gonna have all these slots to get open up or trade the
Yeah.
picks. What are you thinking?
Well, there's definitely going to have to be trades made, whether it be existing prospects, I trade those away, or I trade these picks away, kick them down the road. Some trade, a first this year for a first next year, that type of thing. Um, so yeah, the likelihood of me making all 7 of those first round picks is very slim. Just the nature of this league and how much we trade, I doubt I will be able to hold on to all of them.
Right.
I do have 2 in the lottery. I probably won't trade those unless I just get overwhelmed with a offer. And of course, being the lottery, those 2 could end up being much worse than where they are going into
Yeah,
the lottery. You know what I mean?
it's a
I've had
lottery.
yeah, I've had bad lottery luck in this league every year where I've gotten picks lower than where I was in the standing. So if that continues, but I think we've talked about this on the Discord. This draft is not. There's really no superstars in this draft. There's no Paul Skeens. There's no Jackson Holidays. There's no Cruz in this
Right.
draft. But I do think there are legitimately 30 to 50 guys that could be contributors, whether that be a platoon bat or a bench bat in the majors or an everyday regular. I think there are several names out there that I like, that could fill those type of roles down the
Mm-hmm.
road. But
And have you started? It sounds like you've started to poke around a little bit.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
I've yeah, and there's I keep up with the FYPD pretty once the major league draft, and then once the talk gets out there about them and their landing spots and all that, I look at them, and I've loved to see the debuts, see how they do. There's some that have been slower or less than expected, and there's been some that have been surprises. Um, so it would be interesting to have an FYPD draft right after the major league draft and see how that goes versus one in January like we do. But yeah, so I'm definitely with 7 picks. I've got to start eyeballing it and studying it quite in depth now. but obviously I don't want to give away any hints. But there's a few names that I'll be targeting with those picks. But I have Joe's pick. I think I have your pick.
You
Do I?
do. You
And
do.
I have a few others. So a lot of those picks are going to be in the 20s to 30 range. I mean, if you win it all, or if Joe comes back and beats Duke and wins it all, I've got the last pick. So,
Right.
um, but I think I've got Seattle's pick and I've got Miami's pick, which are kind of in the middle in those high teens, and then I've got the two high ones, my own and Cincinnati's. Um, Hopefully they're high picks, but
Right.
again, I don't really have a clear number one right now. Um, in fact, there's probably 7 or 8 guys that I'd be happy with. So even if I do get bad lottery luck, I probably will end up with a guy I like in that those first 2 picks.
Well, yeah. Let me ask you about the lottery luck for a moment, just in terms of strategy. On the one hand, there's the desire to hold on to the pick to find out what the pick is, because you might be a really high pick if you really like a guy, right? On the other hand, if you're kind of lukewarm on the top end talent in the draft, right? And you want to capitalize on the unknown of where the pick is going to land, is it better to trade the pick before the lottery? What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that?
Well, definitely, I think it is probably better to trade it before the lottery if you're lukewarm on the top 10 or whatever, or the top 5.
Mhm.
Um, but at the same time, if you if the lottery luck goes in your favor and you end up with the 1 or the 2, you could really be kicking yourself and saying I could have got a lot more for this, because your trading partner is also going to know that that's not guaranteed,
Yep.
where you are now. So they're going to devalue that. So I have the second and the fourth spot number of lottery balls.
Yep.
If But if I was trading with myself for that, I'd be looking at that like, well, yeah, you have the fourth most, but that could end up being the eighth, or that could end up being the
Yep.
11th. So I'm not going to give you credit for being pick number 4 until you actually get pick number 4.
Yep.
So there's some of that. I mean, we got a very smart league here. Nobody's going to look at those picks and say, well, they're guaranteed 2 and 4. I mean, you could get 10
Yep.
and 13. I mean, there's lottery simulators out there. I don't know if you've ever seen them, but
Uh-huh.
you can run. It's really geared for the NBA, I think, because they were one of the
Yeah.
first to do lotteries. But you could put in our settings and run simulations all the time. And I've had anywhere from the top 2 picks all the way to 10 and 14 or something like that. It's just crazy. And I'm like, if I get 10 and 14, I'm going to flip out. but
Well, I think we should have a live camera on you when we do the
you probably
lottery.
yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I
Um,
I won't be happy, but that's the way it goes.
right, right, right. So let me ask you this about the draft prep that you're starting to do. Like, describe the process to me. Like, I'm sure it evolves as you get closer to the draft. But like, what are you doing now just to keep tabs? What resources do you like to look at without giving away the secret sauce? Or what are you thinking about?
Yeah, there's I think we talked about this maybe last time too a little bit. I look at the usual suspects, just like pretty much everybody in the league does. You've got the IBW, you've got Prospects Live, you've got the Welsh, you've got Clegg, Baseball America, several of those. But at the same time, there's a lot. I have a lot of follows on Twitter that I
Hmm.
keep tabs on and get live looks, because most of them post video or have a little blurb about them. Follow a lot of the first year player draft guys that way,
Uh-huh.
just to see what they're looking like, and we all see most of the same thing, but I think it's best to get as much information as you can. I don't believe in too much information. You know what I mean? It's
Uh-huh.
you want to read everything you can, and then as we get closer to the draft, I'll probably uh, download every podcast I can on the subject, and just hear what these guys are saying. I think you had mentioned before. Um, earlier this week about the Arizona Fall League.
Hmm.
Definitely, and usually FYPD guys don't go to that, but some do, or they'll do some other type of winter work, and I'll look at all that. I don't put a lot of stock in that.
Well, yeah, let's transition to that topic while we're on it, because that was a topic I had for tonight, and
Yeah,
I'm interested in talking about that too. So,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, I mean, again, it's information. Um, I don't put a lot of stock in it because you've seen a lot of super breakouts in the AFL that the very next year they just tank. And then vice versa. You'll see a guy hit 180 in the AFL, and then all of a sudden he's on a tear in spring training in April and in double A. And you're just, you're like, well, I wish I'd have seen that coming. But there's a lot of deception, I guess. But the AFL's fun. I think it's just more fun because it's after the minor league season. You got a lot of guys from different classifications and leagues that are getting together and facing each other. So it's really more entertainment, I think, for me.
Hmm.
But if you follow the right people and listen and read, you can definitely glean some information from what's going on out there, but you also have to take it with a grain of salt. It's the end of a long season for these kids. A lot of them are worn out, to the point that they're tipping signs and getting kicked off their teams. What was that
Right.
guy from was it the Brewers or Twins? Who was it? Twins, I
I,
think.
I don't remember this. What
Oh,
happened?
oh, you didn't hear about the guy that he was tipping pitches or something. Um, he's a catcher, and
Ah,
and he wanted the season to end because he was tired. And I think it was the Twins, but I'm not 100% sure now. So anyway, they basically fired him. They said, they just signed him or he was in the FYPD or the MLB draft, and they just signed him, and he was tired and worn out and ready to wrap up the season, and he was tanking. He was doing the ABL tank, but
there you go.
but anyway, yeah,
ABL.
they fired him, and I guarantee you, he's going to have a hard time finding a job in the U.S. again. He'll probably have to head over to
Yeah.
Japan or Korea or something. But
Well, it's interesting. The Arizona Fall League. It's a fun showcase. It's supposed to be a finishing school for a lot of these prospects,
mm-hmm.
and and as you said, they're kids from all different levels coming together, right? So one of the things I look at in thinking about the Arizona Fall League is looking at the players who are younger and how they're performing against the older competition,
Yeah,
because it's an unusual opportunity to kind of evaluate that, right? I'm less impressed by a guy in AAA who is like playing against guys in A ball,
yeah,
right? I mean, it's obviously a mix, but the point is, if he's going up against a pitcher who's an A ball, I'm like a little less impressed. But if the A ball pitcher is striking guys out and like getting it done, I take note of that. So
yeah,
for some of it, it's like just being aware of who's who in the ABL in the AFL. And I mean, your grain of salt point is well taken, because it's also on top of the fatigue point that you made. Um, it's a very small sample size,
yeah.
right? You're
I
talking
mean,
about 100 at bats, you know, um, give or take. And, so I try to like focus on certain ratios, certain metrics for hitters that, stabilize more quickly than others. Like I'm not looking at batting average or like, slugging percentage, because it's just, too few at bats to really think about that too seriously for
yeah,
me anyway. But I am looking at strikeout rate and walk rates, and are they in line with the players' past performance, and particularly again if it's a younger hitter and he's getting it done and like holding his own in the contact area against older competition, that catches my attention for sure.
yeah.
Um, do you think about using any like social media bounce a player might have in value from the AFL in terms of like trading one of your prospects?
Yeah. That's always important to kind of get a gauge. So in fantasy football, they have a website called Keep Trade Cut, and basically it's crowdsourcing everybody's opinions on
Uh-huh.
fantasy football players, and you kind of get a general sense of what the public or what
Mhm.
Joe owner, fantasy owner thinks about a player. So from that standpoint, you have, and baseball doesn't have that. Um, so you kind of have to piece that together yourself more
Mhm.
through social media and kind of get an idea of a value of a player. And yeah, if you own somebody that you're kind of not so high on, but everybody out there else is, or vice versa, even, then it does present a buying opportunity or a selling opportunity on
Yeah.
certain players.
Yeah, because I'm definitely looking to cash in um, on that same scenario you just outlined from the AFL if I can. Because a lot of these at that time of year in the prospecting world, there's not a lot to write about
Mm-hmm.
because you're still far enough away from the J15, where that news cycle hasn't really started as much, and obviously the minor league season is over, right?
Yep.
So everybody is in some regards kind of myopically focused on the AFL. And it is fun, to track and keep, and see what's going on, how players are doing. But I always kind of view it as an interesting selling opportunity and buying opportunity, and it corresponds with the short track trade window, right?
Yep.
That
Mm-hmm.
we have in ABL after the season ends. So that's, to me, that's always like a good opportunity to move those guys or to acquire them, as the case may be.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
I think it definitely requires more work. Like to your point earlier, you're looking at stats that aren't just readily available. You're not going to look at the batting average and on base. You got to really dig into the box score and see, well, who were they facing? What type of level of competition was this? And dig down a little bit deeper than you would just looking at traditional double A, triple A minor league box scores day in and day out. So it does require a little bit more work. But yeah, small sample size, um, knowing the variables that are there can present opportunities for to buy and sell.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Let's. I want to jump back to your 7 draft picks for a hot second and your draft prep, because as we were talking, I was thinking more about all the resources you're going to, and it's quite a lot. I mean, it's it underscores just like how competitive the ABL is, that you've got owners doing all the work that you outlined, and we all have day jobs too, of course.
Hmm.
Um, you know, what sort of podcast do you like attract you in terms of the first year player draft?
Um, I've bounced around to a lot of different ones. I really like, and I know he's a radio guy, but Welsh is always entertaining. He's well spoken. He's very passionate um, about his opinions. I do like listening to him, though. But I think he is one of the few out there that is not as reactionary to day to day changes, fluctuations. Uh, I used to, listen to Cross and Clegg a lot. I kind of drifted away because of Cross, but I find Clegg, now that he's kind of on his own, doing his own thing, is really, I mean, his write ups are really strong. He does a lot of work. He's put a lot of work into it. I like him. Tune out Cross a little bit, but uh, and I guess anytime I can find a podcast with Jeff Ponce on it, I mean,
Yeah,
he's one of the best. The guy's just, I think he's just brilliant when it comes to evaluation and the way he presents, um, the information. I love listening to anything that he jumps on. But yeah, I mean, I bounce around quite a bit with it when it comes to podcasts, and I usually don't have that much time during the season as I would like. But yeah, leading up to the draft and the auction next year, I'll probably be listening to 2 or 3 a day if I can.
Dedication. See, there you go. That's the ABL competition for you.
Right.
Yeah, I don't listen to a ton of podcasts myself, but Ponce is a guy that I do listen to. And one of the things I found really interesting about his work is that he's now become so established and respected that he actually has some pretty good connections,
Yeah.
in terms of like the scouting community and talking to people in baseball. And it just adds a lot of value to his brand, in my view. And obviously his stuff on Baseball America is great. And, he's, I think really kind of been thoughtful in refining his approach to scouting and to evaluation over the years. And I find it interesting just to listen to him, how it's evolved over time for him. Um, so I'm definitely on board with that. And Clegg's an interesting guy. I was in a dynasty league with him
Oh
for
yeah.
a short while. Yeah. Um, he's a nice guy. But I have not got, really followed his new site, and a lot of the owners coming on the show have talked about him. So maybe I'll have to check that out.
Yeah.
I'm a big Baseball America, guy, and I have fewer sources that I go to. I kind of like put my eggs in fewer baskets. But there's definitely something to be said for like cast a wide net, like it sounds like you're doing.
Yeah.
Um,
And I didn't even mention Halpern. I mean, he doesn't do podcasts a lot, but I do love his write-ups. I think anybody that dedicates as much, writing to the topic, whether you agree with them or not, it's worth investing in. And Clegg does that. Halpern does that. And of course, Ponce on BA. And then Welsh, he doesn't write as much, but he's always on something, on a podcast. He's got his own, and he's always a guest on others. So he's putting out a lot of content that way. But somebody that's really just digging down deep into it like that, I mean, I think it's worth the investment.
yeah, well, it's interesting. You're talking about appearing on other people's podcasts. Um, Clegg has been on some podcasts on Baseball America with Ponce,
Yeah,
which to me was impressive that Clegg's already like getting on those shows. And they also have guys from Baseball America, excuse me, Baseball HQ come on, which is another publication that I follow closely, because I like their scouting guys. So that's interesting. And what to what extent are you looking at the statistics that the first year player drafts put up in their debuts as you're evaluating for the purposes of our fantasy draft?
well, it's pretty similar to what you talked about with the AFL. You're looking at some of the deeper stats more so than the surface stats, because it is a smaller sample size. They're not joining their minor league affiliates until midway through the year. Most of them are getting 100 at bats if they're lucky. There's a lot that that have already injured out for the season. So
Yep.
they got maybe a handful of at bats, and there's a lot that don't even debut. Um,
Yeah,
so
particularly the pitchers.
yeah, correct. So I don't put a lot of stock in that. I look more at what they did in college, if they're a college kid, or like I said, if I'll read a lot about them and see what the scouts are saying about the high school kids. Doesn't seem to be a huge high school class this year.
Yeah.
A lot of big names in that, but there's some decent names there. A lot of college bats, and I find college bats, they're of course not only proximity wise they're valuable, but they also they're very steady. And in a league like ABL, you win with those steady guys.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, everybody wants the Aaron Judge or the Juan Sotos, but you can usually trade for those type of guys if you have enough of a solid foundation with those everyday, you know, one war type players. Um, you can win. You can. I mean, heck, Tony back when he had the Marlins back in year one, he proved it with his team making the playoffs with a bunch of just nobody, no names, but they played every day, or he had enough that he could just mix and match. And He's successful that way. And if you get enough of those guys and then can make swing a big trade or two for a big bat or a big arm, then you can go a long way.
Yeah, no, for sure. Playing time, is a big factor in a 30-team league.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. So these guys who are going to be regulars, even if they're not superstars, and particularly on the with the salary cap in place before the draft, it can make a huge difference. So definitely something to consider. And some of these guys come up pretty quickly. I think the risk to me is you're always passing up on potentially much higher ceiling for guys further away. And there's some give and take there, I guess, in terms of like where you are in the first round. It seems like if you have a top 5 pick, for example, like something you said earlier, like the best player available is probably the right approach, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As opposed to proximity. But if you're in the back of the first round, like I think that's where, for me at least, that's where those considerations start to come in. So I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, but in this league, platoon bats are valuable. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got this year. I wasn't contending, but I had Jock Peterson and Brandon Marsh on my roster, and both of them sit anytime a lefty's on the mound. But inevitably, every game they both come in and pinch hit,
Yep.
and I don't know what it is. Jock Peterson, he every time he pinch hits, he gets a home run or something. I had him the other day. He had the little red X by his name,
Yeah.
and he still scored 8 points.
Yep.
It's like, geez, and he's got he's averaging I think 3.2 or something like that this year. He's been very valuable, even though he is a platoon bat. He's been
Yeah.
very valuable to the little success that I did have this year.
Yeah, I've got Jesus Sanchez. He plays a little bit more than that, but particularly after the Marlins cleaned house, he's been playing a lot more. But early in the season, he was only playing against righties, and he plays all the outfield. This year, he was like limited to 2 of the outfield positions, but that has value. Where you can like slug a guy into the lineup, and plug right when one of your stars gets a day off, or you can fill him in the utility spot. So yeah, definitely adds value. And I think those proximity guys they have some risk of becoming platoon bats, but if they can get 5 games a week, that's a steal, right?
Yeah.
And
it also depends on how good their defense is. I mean, Cowser, there was some risk with that with Cowser early in the year, but his defense has just been tremendous. And he's playing every day now, and of course he is hitting both lefties and righties, and playing well this year. He's been a great surprise for me. And then, I think the knock on a few other of those proximity guys is the same thing. But if they can play some defense, they're going to get in there.
Yeah.
They're going to get 4 or 5 starts a week, and they're going to come in as defensive subs or against the same-handed pitcher. And, that's value in this league. That's a lot of value.
Yeah, well, I'm going to be putting Zach Wheeler on the block after the season. So, you and I might, be talking trade.
Okay.
So if you want to move some of those first-round picks, like,
maybe. You never know.
My goal is to get a trade done during the show at some point. So, if I can pull that off and negotiate a trade live on the show, that'd be a lot of fun. So,
great.
Yeah, maybe I'll have you back on if we're like,
What's Wheeler's contract look like?
Let's see what it is. It's in the low 30s or mid 30s. Let me see. Yeah, things I don't have to worry about right now is I'm just hoping he gets starts. But let's see. Zach's contract is $32, signed through 2026.
Okay, I mean that's reasonable. He would go for a lot more than that on the open market.
Yep.
I just don't know if I'm at that point yet. That might be 2025. I want to contend again, but I don't think my youngsters will all be ready until maybe 2026 or beyond. But we can talk about it. You never know.
There you go. I like it. Keep an open mind. You never know. You never know. But when I saw those 7 picks, I was like, well, I don't know, maybe Mark and I'll make a deal. Maybe I'll come down to the your neck of the woods in the spring. We'll make a deal then. You never know. Over a beer at a bar.
Yeah, it depends how many beers you buy me.
There you go. There you go. I've tried that tactic in different contexts, not fantasy baseball, but yeah. So let's talk a little bit about my favorite part of the show, which is the crushes and fades, because I'm interested in hearing this this guy you were previewing earlier. So so who are your crushes right now?
Well, let me preface this all by this is probably the most difficult part, because I don't want to give anything away, but at the same time, I want to definitely provide you with some content here. So what I do, I have one crush, one fade, and one what I call a fuck up.
Okay.
And then I have a few honorable mention.
I love it. Let's do it.
So, my crush is Hensock Tan. You heard of him?
I have heard of Tam.
Okay, so he's a young Korean pitcher, signed with the Dodgers out of high school. He skipped the KBO. He was going to be the number 1 overall pick in the KBO draft, but he forewent that to sign with the Dodgers to live his dream in the major leagues. He had a disastrous rookie ball. I think he put up like an 8.8 ERA or something like that. But then they promoted him to single A, and he's been really good. He's pitched, let's see, I've got it written down here somewhere. I want to say 5 starts, 5 games, about 11 innings. He's got a 2.19 ERA, a sub-1 WHIP. His main issue right now is his control. He's walking a lot of batters. But the stuff is just off the charts right now for a 20-year-old kid that's just, basically just out of high school. He didn't pitch at all last year, but or with the Dodgers last year, but he's been pitching this year, and he's starting the hype train starting on him. I see a few more blurbs, but I have him in the ABL. I don't have him in the ARL or my other league, but I'm strongly considering it as his name starts to pop up on more and more lists, and more of the experts start touting him.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: How did you get onto him?
I can't even remember. I think it was a podcast though, and I took him in the 3rd round, maybe. It might have been the 2nd round even last year. And the funny thing is, and I think I told you this before, was that I asked Duke if he would even if he was eligible, since he's coming over from Korea. Usually those guys have to go through the auction, but since he hasn't played professional ball before, he was eligible. And Duke was like, I'd never even heard of this guy. But I'd heard him in one of those podcasts. It might have even been Ponce, or it might have been Welsh. But I can't recall. But I heard right before FYPD, and that goes into the, what we talked about earlier. You listen as much information as you can get. So I highlighted his name, and I probably reached for him. I probably could have got him much later in that draft, but
you took him in the 2nd round, pick 11.
Yeah, see, I reached for him most likely. I probably could have got him in 3rd or 4th round. I don't know who anybody else was on him at that point, but I really have high hopes for him. Now, of course, I'm the guy that also believes highly in TINSTAP. Prospects, pitchers can just break your heart. Look at Daniel Espino and Andrew Painter, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So there's that factor, but he's a big kid. He's like 6'3", 6'4", great size for a 20-year-old. And early returns in single A have been positive. I would have loved to see him in high A, but we'll have to probably wait till next year for that.
But he's in a good organization too, right?
Exactly. I think they can fix his control problems because his stuff is off the charts. It's great stuff. It's just, he's that Edward Cabrera is gonna walk 6 batters a
Right.
game.
Right.
But if they can fix that, then yeah, I think they've got another superstar in their system. And I hope he works out. He's one of my 20 prospects that I won't be moving, most likely, unless I get bowled over. Him and Walker Jenkins are probably my top
Yep.
two in my mind right now. So
Jenkins is a good prospect.
Yes. 3 other crushes. These names you probably, I mean, everybody's heard these names, but these are guys that I would like to acquire at some point, if not in ABL, in my other leagues. Luke Keyshaw, Jesus Made. There's been a lot of talk about him lately. His name's been blowing up, but I think Joe grabbed him pretty early on. And I was kind of waiting and seeing it still at that point with him, but he's continually gotten better and better. And then the third one is Dylan Beavers. I tried to get him from Kevin. A while back, but he was not budging on that. So I think.
What do you like about Beavers?
I do like the college bat from a big program, and just some of the intangibles that I've read about him, the competitor, he's got that dog in him, that type of guy. I've always had a soft spot for those type of athletes, because even if they have flaws in their game or areas where their physical talent might not shine through, they still work at it and they keep working at it. And I think he's one of those guys that's gonna really take off here next year.
Yep. I mean, look, he's a known commodity, as you said, because he's been around for years, but he also may be debuting pretty soon.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know where the Orioles are going to play him, but
Yeah, that's been my problem all year with Kyle Stowers, and now we finally moved him, and then I've got Heston, and I've got Cowser, and I've got a lot of Orioles that seems like they're going up too.
Well, it's a good organization to be plucking prospects from, but they have the logjam problem. I mean, Cowser's obviously gotten that cured.
He's been great. I'm really been pleased with what I got there. But of course, I traded away. I looked at it today. I traded Brent Rooker to get him. And Logan Webb. It was Brent Rooker, Logan Webb for Durstad, Cowser, and Joey Weimer, which he's been a disaster. But I think I got 2 out of 3 there, which is, pretty good percentage when you're talking prospects. If you can get 67% of your prospects to be good. But, Rooker's had a phenomenal year, and Webb's always solid, but, it was part of the teardown before the auction happened that I was already in the process of doing. So, but Webb was at a great contract. Definitely would have helped if I was contending this year, but that didn't happen thanks to injuries, pitching injuries.
I know. I hear you. So who are the fades?
I only got one fade for you. I'm really not fading too many people right now. There's a lot of FYPD fades I have, but I don't want to go into those. Tink Hintz. I know you're going to not like being a Cardinal fan, but I used to be really high on Tink Hintz, and it really doesn't have much. It has little to do with the injury that he's. What was 2 days ago? That just kind of compounded it, but I was starting to fade him. I had him in another league, and I traded him away at the beginning of the season. And then he started, he was pitching well there for a while, and I was kind of regretting it. But then he had some rough patches. I don't know. I'm not getting the feeling. I think if he is going to be successful, it might be a while before we see that. It might be 3+ years before we see that, which is fine. I mean, this is a dynasty league, and you can hold these guys for that long. But I'm not seeing that immediate impact type of arm right now from him, and I just don't know if it's going to be there long term either. So yeah,
Right. Hence is the guy I've talked about him a lot on this show. And there are some people who have him on their crush list or their fade list, or like, or we've just talked about him, like, from time to time. I think I had him at one point as like, hot or not. Like I do that episode with that segment with people sometimes.
yeah,
And what's interesting to me about him is kind of the roller coaster hype around Hence. Like there are times when he's like talked about as an ascending prospect. Other times he's talked about as like, oh, maybe he's fading. You'll hear about him on like, podcasts and he'll go up and down these top 100, lists. But what really has struck me about Hens is like, some of the stuff I've read on Baseball America about his fastball, and his fastball command just not being where it needs to be in a really successful and consistent major league pitcher. And the question is, from my perspective, is like, can that be addressed through coaching and adjustments, right? Because he does have good stuff. But the knock on him is that his secondary pitches are better than his fastball, and that is not typically as a recipe for success, in the major league level, right? He is a slighter pitcher too, and as I think folks know, I'm a advocate of frame, particularly when it comes to pitchers, and it does increase, generally speaking, his injury risk.
yeah,
And he's not been free of injury. This is not his first rodeo when it comes to being injured. He's also incidentally a guy who was in the Arizona Fall League not too long ago.
yeah,
And it was really, in some respects, a down season for him a year ago, as I'm recalling anyway. Then he got into the Arizona Fall League, and he kind of like really came on, as you were saying, this season, early in the season, and he was like shooting up prospects lists, and became harder and harder to acquire. And I was joking on a podcast earlier this year about how I had traded all my Hen shares going into the draft this year because I was trying to parlay that bounce he got by being in the Arizona Fall League and dealing him, and was able to sell him off, was able to get decent value for him. And then he had this great season, right? He had this great start to the season, and I was like, oh, man. So then I started looking into reacquiring him in some of the leagues, and nobody was willing to move him, right? So I don't know, what to do with him. Is he a guy you target because he's low, or is he a guy you stay away from? And I guess where I net out is like the scouting reports that I've been reading about him, which is kind of like not being willing to pay a high price for him,
that's pretty much it for me. I mean, I'd value him in the 150 prospect range, but I think he's too high right now. And of course, the injury compounds that a little bit, and that might get reflected in future ranking lists that you'll see down the road. But in my personal list, he's probably in that range. So I would still acquire him if the price is right. But I got a feeling whoever owns him is not going to want to sell at that range. But yeah, that's pretty much my only fade. Like I said, I have some in the FYPD that I'm going to probably be fading, but we can do another episode after that draft if you want.
Yeah, sure. No, I want to have a big post draft podcast this year. So I'll see if I can arrange for that and have people give like their fades or grades for drafts or something like that. Yeah. You actually have another Cardinal pitcher on your roster, Connor Herpy, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are on him right now.
I was pretty high on him, and then he had his injury, and we still don't know what it really is. I mean, there's hardly any information out there about minor league injuries.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was looking really strong. I was liking what I was seeing. I still don't think he's any more than a number 4, number 5 type guy back end. And it was, for a while there, it looked like we might even see him this year.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, nobody on my roster is ever untouchable. If the price is right, I'll always sell. But with him, I'm kind of neutral. I'm not really fading him at all, but
Yeah.
probably not crushing on him either at this moment. I got him and Hoagland about the same, kind of in that same proximity.
Yeah.
Um, and hopefully, we'll see what they look like in the spring, and they'll probably start double A, maybe triple A, and see what that looks like. But yeah, kind of just in neutral on him at the moment.
Yep. I'll tell you another guy on your roster I like is Welbin Francisca.
Yes. He's
And I
he
think
is a
he's
typical Cleveland Guardian type of prospect. Little power, great hit tool. I'm a sucker for hit tool, and hope that they can develop the power. But yeah, I like him a lot. You know, I've heard the comps range anywhere from Jose Ramirez on down. So,
yeah, yeah.
but of course, he doesn't have that power yet. But if he's still young, still growing. I like him a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, he's 18. Yeah, he's one of those prospects that I was monitoring and monitoring and monitoring, and I didn't pick him up because of the power,
Yeah.
and I was kind of getting to the place where I was like, all right, maybe I'll pick him up, and then you grabbed him. So I just missed out on him. So it'd be interesting to see how he develops.
Yeah, I
But
mean, like we've talked about, there's a lot of value in that top of the order profile, and if he can
yeah,
steal a few bases to go along with it, get you 2.75 points, 3 points a game.
sure,
There's value in that in this league, on a short-term contract. So,
yep,
you like to have those guys. I do have a big crush on, if you want to have a crush on a profile, it's his type of profile. At his age, because
yeah,
I think it's harder to learn that than it is to develop the power later on. I think that's more, comes with the maturity, um, of his build. Now he doesn't have a lot. He doesn't have the build that's going to put on a lot more, but still maturity. Um, there will be some power. I've seen most comps, or not comps, but most projections have him as a 10 to 15 home run type guy.
yeah,
So
yeah. Well, look, and as you said, in this league, if he can develop a strong, you know, ball percentage, walk percentage ratio, and get on base in
yep,
this league, and consequently score runs, right? I mean, which leads to the points. That has real value in this league.
yep,
Um, so yeah, he's a really interesting prospect, and I think he's also one of those guys because of his hit tool, um, that he'll always be in the conversation about like top 100 lists, and so his name will become more and more popular as a
yeah,
trade chip for you. And, I mean, not that you necessarily want to trade him, but like he'll be an asset you could move if you
yeah,
want to.
yeah.
So those kind of prospects have a lot of value too.
Yeah,
Um,
everything in this league is currency. Even the aging
yeah,
veteran to the first round picks, it's all currency. It's all has value to some people more than others, and you know you can always work out something. But like I said, I doubt I keep those all 7 picks. But if I do, I'm prepared to make them all and then make some cuts. There's plenty of prospects that I can cut. And
yep.
I think it's Evan that's out there waiting for everybody to make cuts so he can go in and swoop in and pick some up. But I don't know if any of my cuts would be worth swooping in and picking up, but you never know.
Yeah. I enjoy watching Evan make cuts because it's usually the guys he's trying to offer to me.
Yeah, yeah.
And then they get cut. I'm like, thanks.
We have a few of those
um,
guys.
Yeah, yeah. So, listen, Mark, this is a lot of fun, and I really appreciate you coming on the show to talk about these things and to share your little family adventure and your reflections on New Jersey
Yeah,
and the roads in the Northeast.
I did want to give you that one fuck up because I
Oh
had
yeah, you haven't done that yet. Give that to
crush
me.
and a fuck up. Well, my fuck up. So I was probably one of the first on Sebastian Walcott. He I got him in ABL. I got him in ARL. I got him in my score sheet league. So I'm in 3 leagues. I had him in all 3 leagues. Probably one of the first on him. Heard a lot of stuff in the off season before his his J15 year,
Yeah,
and grabbed him early and loved it. Well, last off season, there were some concerns about his hit tool, And
Yep.
and I'm a big hit tool guy. If you can't hit the ball, you're not going to be very successful in this world. So I decided to diversify. I've still got him in 2 leagues, but I traded him to Joe in ABL. And I got back Diego Cartaya and first round pick, his first round pick.
Yep.
I thought that was a decent return because at that point he was dropping down lists. He was fading. He was a fade for me at that point.
Yep.
And of course, this year he's been phenomenal. He's looking like a superstar. He's a top 10, top 20 type prospect on most lists. And yeah, that's a fuck up.
Well, we all have those.
Yes.
And as I've mentioned on the show a number of times, mine is Jackson Churia.
Oh yeah.
So I had that's a bad one. So I was on Jackson Churio when he was coming in as a J15. Then at that time it was a J2, and I had him everywhere. And he was 16 years old. Like, I loved him, and then he struggled, right? And like, I started like trading him away, and then like, something clicked,
Yeah.
and he just shot up. Like, and obviously he's had a great, he's had a great year, and so we all have those, and some are worse than others. So don't worry there, Mark.
Well, I did have Ellie De La Cruz in year 1 of this league.
Yeah, so I mean, there are good stories too, right? I mean, so like and so you take your lumps, and none of us is perfect, but I like that. I like that. Well, listen, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and we wish you best in luck in the rebuild and with the draft picks. And don't forget about Zach Wheeler. We can always talk in that short window. But for everybody else watching at home, remember to ABP, always be prospecting.
That's right.